All right, so you guys sent in some really fascinating stuff about Christianity, how it rose, and the impact it's had.
Yeah.
We're going from it basically being illegal to being a major force in Western Civ.
Hmm.
You ready to have your mind blown a little bit?
Hmm.
Because we're uncovering paradoxes and twists and turns that might change how you think about this whole thing.
Yeah, it all starts in the Roman Empire. Think about it. There were no real safety nets for the vulnerable back then.
Right.
No social security, no widespread charity life. Was really brutal for a lot of people.
That is so different from how we think about things now.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine.
And that's where the early church comes in. They really stepped in to provide aid and community to those people who were just kind of overlooked by that Roman system. Some historians even call it the first functioning welfare state.
So they weren't just preaching, they were actually like getting their hands dirty and helping people.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty smart.
Exactly. It was practical Christianity. They were living out those ideals of charity. And by helping people in need, it was a major factor in their growth. It created this foundation of support among the people that the empire was neglecting.
It makes sense. It wasn't just faith, it was action.
Right.
It makes you think about the role of bishops back then. What were they even doing?
Bishops had a really interesting role. They weren't just spiritual leaders.
Right.
They were tasked with organizing all of that charitable work.
Okay.
And that gave them serious influence, even among non-Christians, because it showed that the church had this practical value that they were bringing to their communities.
So they were like the original community organizers.
Yeah, in a way.
Okay, so we're seeing this early appeal. It was way beyond just believing in something. There's this whole social dimension to it.
Right.
But let's talk about the crucifixion.
Yeah.
How did this event that was supposed to be the ultimate humiliation become the symbol of this powerful religion?
It's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
To the Romans, crucifixion was for the absolute lowest of the low.
Yeah.
A public display of Roman power and the ultimate punishment.
Yeah.
And yet this becomes Christianity's central image.
It's like they completely flipped the script.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Christ himself, he reinforces this whole concept of like overturning the hierarchy. He said, the last shall be first and the first shall be last.
Wow.
That quote really gets to the heart of Christianity's kind of revolutionary message.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
It's no wonder this message, this idea of uplifting the powerless, has inspired revolutions and social movements throughout history.
It's a theme that keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Challenging those established power structures.
All right, let's fast forward a bit and talk about Constantine.
Okay.
His conversion feels like a major turning point.
Yeah.
We go from Christianity being outlawed to being accepted, even embraced by the emperor.
Right.
What were the real implications of that change?
Constantine's conversion was huge. His Edict of Milan in 313 CE granted religious freedom to Christians, a total change from the persecution they'd been facing.
Yeah.
This really allowed the faith to take root and flourish openly in Roman society.
I bet those early Christians were like, phew, finally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Constantine's support, it went way beyond just tolerance.
Yeah.
He actively provided resources and legitimacy to the church,
Okay.
and that helped them expand their reach and their influence.
I know.
But it's really crucial to understand why Constantine did this. It wasn't just like a personal faith thing.
Okay.
He saw Christianity as a way to unify this vast empire of his, which was, incredibly diverse and often really fractured.
So there was some strategy involved.
Oh, yeah.
Like he saw political advantages to aligning himself with Christianity.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
And it created a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Think about it, this concept of one all-powerful God.
Right.
It kind of mirrored Constantine's own ambition as a single emperor ruling over a unified people. But this move also laid the groundwork for this really complex relationship between church and state that we still grapple with today. Who really holds the power? Where is the line?
Yeah.
These questions become central to the story of Christianity moving forward.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
Makes you think. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into Christianity's lasting impact and how it's still shaping the world today.
Sounds good. It's fascinating how Constantine's decision really set the stage for this ongoing debate about Christianity's role in society.
Yeah.
Like, should it be a force for social change, or should it primarily focus on, spiritual matters? It's this tension that we see playing out over and over again.
And it's still relevant today, right?
Yeah.
We see these debates happening all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Like take wokeness, for example.
Yeah.
It's a very modern movement. But some argue it has roots in Christian thought, which is Kind of wild when you think about it.
It might seem surprising, but there are definite connections. Wokeness, with its focus on social justice and challenging power structures, it actually echoes some core Christian principles. Remember that line from the Bible we talked about earlier? The last shall be first.
Yeah.
That idea has fueled so many movements for social change throughout history.
So even if some modern activists aren't like explicitly religious,
All right.
they're still drawing on that deeper current of Christian thought about equality and justice.
Precisely. It's like this thread running through Western history, this idea that we have a moral obligation to uplift the marginalized and fight for a more just world.
Okay, so wokeness might be a modern example, but we see this same dynamic at play in earlier movements, right?
Absolutely. Think about the civil rights movement in the U.S. Martin Luther King Jr., a Baptist minister, he was deeply influenced by his Christian faith.
Right.
He talked about the need to redeem the soul of America, to create a society where everyone was treated with dignity and respect.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, and his message resonated with so many people because it tapped into that deeper well of Christian ethics, even though the movement itself was diverse and included people from many different backgrounds.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Those ideas of love and compassion and justice
Right.
are not just religious concepts.
No.
They're fundamental human values that have been shaped in part by Christianity's long influence on Western culture. But it's not just social movements.
Right.
Christianity's had a massive impact on how we think about everything.
Totally.
Art, literature, law, government, you name it.
It really has permeated every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
I think one of the most significant contributions is this concept of universal love.
Okay.
You know, before Christianity, love was often seen as this very limited thing, tribal even. You loved your family, your clan, your city-state. But Christianity, it expanded that circle of love to encompass all of humanity.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
It's like it planted the seed for this idea of a global community
Yeah.
where everyone is valued and worthy of respect
Yeah.
simply because they're human.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective has had a profound impact on everything from our art and literature, which often explore themes of human connection and empathy, to our laws and institutions, which ideally are designed to protect the rights and dignity of all citizens.
And we can see how that emphasis on individual worth ties into things like human rights,
Absolutely.
which are so central to our understanding of a just society today.
Right. But, and this is crucial to remember, Christianity's influence hasn't always been positive.
Right.
There are definitely some dark chapters in its history,
Yeah.
times when it's been used to justify oppression, violence, and tolerance.
We can't shy away from that, can we?
No, we can't.
The Crusades, the Inquisition, these are events that remind us that even the most well-intentioned ideas
Right.
can be twisted and misused to cause harm.
Absolutely. And we need to acknowledge that complexity, that tension between the good and the bad when we're talking about Christianity's impact on the world. It's not a simple story.
No, it's not. It's like anything else.
Yeah.
I guess there's always that potential for misuse and misinterpretation,
Right.
especially with something as powerful as religion.
For sure.
But let's be honest, it's not like these kinds of abuses are unique to Christianity.
Yuri.
History is full of examples of power being corrupted,
It is.
regardless of the ideology.
Yeah, it's a human problem, not just a Christian one.
Mm.
And it's a reminder that we always need to be vigilant, question authority, and fight for justice no matter what our beliefs are.
Well said. So we've talked about Christianity's impact on social movements, its influence on Western culture,
Right.
and the complexities of its historical legacy.
Yeah.
But where do we go from here? What's the future of Christianity? Is it fading away? Or does it still have something to offer the world in the 21st century?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And I don't think anyone has a definitive answer, but I think it's fair to say that Christianity is at a crossroads.
Okay.
On the one hand, we're seeing declining church attendance in many parts of the world. And there's this growing sense that organized religion is losing its relevance, especially among younger generations.
I could see that. With the rise of secularism and the internet, people have access to so many different ideas and beliefs now.
Right.
It's not like it used to be, where the church was the main source of information and community for most people.
You're right. The landscape has definitely changed, but I think it's important to remember that Christianity has always been evolving.
Okay.
It's not static.
Yeah.
It's adapted and reinvented itself throughout history.
Right.
And I think that's key to its survival in the modern world.
So what does adaptation look like in this context?
Well, we're already seeing some interesting trends. For example, there's this growing movement of progressive Christianity,
Right.
which is more open to things like same-sex marriage, women in leadership roles, and a real focus on social justice.
Hmm.
It's a way of kind of reconciling traditional faith with more modern values.
It's like they're taking the best of both worlds, holding on to those core values of Christianity while also recognizing that the world has changed.
Exactly.
And some of the old interpretations need to be updated.
Right. And then there's this growing interest in spirituality and mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
which might lead some people back to Christianity or other faith traditions.
Okay.
It's like people are searching for meaning and connection in a world that often feels chaotic and disconnected.
So there's a hunger for something more,
Yeah.
something beyond just the material world.
Right.
And maybe Christianity, with its emphasis on love, compassion, and community, can offer a way to fulfill that hunger.
I think that's a possibility. But for Christianity to really thrive in the 21st century,
Yeah.
it needs to do more than just adapt. It needs to rediscover its prophetic voice. It needs to speak truth to power, to challenge injustice, and to offer a vision of a world where everyone can flourish.
You're saying it needs to be a force for positive change,
Yeah.
not just a source of comfort and tradition.
Exactly. It needs to be relevant to people's lives, to address the issues they care about, and to offer real solutions. If it can do that, I think Christianity can still have a bright future. But if it just clings to outdated doctrines and fails to engage with the complexities of the modern world,
Yeah.
it risks becoming increasingly irrelevant.
It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
It is.
If Christianity can rise to the occasion,
Yeah,
it could play a vital role in shaping a more just and compassionate world.
I agree. And that brings us back to one of the most important things we've discussed today.
Okay.
This idea of Christianity as a force for social change.
Right. It's easy to get lost in the historical details.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about how these ideas play out in the real world,
Absolutely.
how they impact people's lives.
Right. And that's where the real power of Christianity lies, and its potential to inspire us to act, to make a difference, to create a better world.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Right.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, this idea of Christianity's evolving relationship with power.
Right.
We talked about Constantine and the tension between church and state that his conversion created.
Yeah.
But that tension didn't just disappear, did it?
Oh, not at all. It continued to play out in all sorts of fascinating ways throughout history. One example that comes to mind is the investiture controversy in the 11th century.
Okay.
It was this epic power struggle between Pope Gregory VII and Emperor Henry I.
Wow.
Basically a showdown over who had the ultimate authority to appoint bishops.
Wait, so we're talking about kings and popes battling it out over religious appointments?
We are.
That sounds intense.
It was Gregory, a powerful and reform-minded pope.
Oh.
He asserted the church's independence from secular rulers. He believed that the church should have the sole right to choose its own leaders without interference from kings or emperors.
So he was standing up to the emperor saying the church wasn't going to be a puppet of the state.
Yeah,
That's pretty bold.
it was a radical move. But Henry IV, he wasn't about to give up his power so easily.
Right.
He saw bishops as key figures in his realm.
Okay.
Not just religious leaders, but also political allies
Mm.
who controlled vast wealth and land.
Right.
So controlling those appointments was crucial to maintaining his own power and influence.
So it wasn't just about religious doctrine.
Yeah.
It was about real worldly power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this conflict, it escalated into a full-blown crisis,
Wow.
with Henry declaring Gregory deposed
Okay.
and Gregory excommunicating Henry in return.
Hold on. Excommunication. That sounds serious. What did that even mean back then?
It was huge. It meant that Henry was cut off from the church, denied the sacraments, and essentially condemned in the eyes of his fellow Christians.
Yeah.
It also undermined his authority as ruler
Okay.
because many people believed that a king needed the church's blessing to be legitimate.
So it was like a spiritual and political weapon all rolled into one.
Precisely. And this conflict dragged on for years.
Oh.
With both sides digging in their heels, it eventually led to a compromise.
Okay.
But that underlying tension between church and state, it continued to simmer.
So even though there was a truce, that fundamental question of who's really in charge
Yeah.
never really went away.
Never. It's a question that has haunted Western civilization for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still with us today. Think about all the debates we have about religious freedom, the separation of church and state, the role of faith in public life.
Right.
These are all echoes of that ancient struggle between spiritual and temporal authority.
It's amazing how these historical events continue to shape our understanding of the world
It is.
and the big questions we grapple with today.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and names.
Right.
It's about ideas about power dynamics and about the ongoing struggle to define what it means to be human in a complex and ever-changing world.
Well said. And that's a perfect note to end on for this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore. When we return, we'll delve even deeper into the complexities of Christianity's legacy and the big questions it raises about faith power and the human search for meaning. Welcome back. As we're wrapping up this deep dive into Christianity, I'm struck by how often this faith seems to turn things upside down.
That's a great observation. We've seen how a religion focused on a crucified man became a symbol of power.
Yeah.
How teachings about humility inspired revolutions.
Right.
And how this ancient faith is still evolving today. It's full of these paradoxes.
That Christianity keeps challenging our expectations,
It does.
both historically and in how it continues to shape the world today.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important takeaway for our listener from all of this?
I'd say it's the sheer complexity of Christianity's impact.
Yeah.
It's a story that goes way beyond simple narratives.
Right.
It's about the interplay of faith and power, the struggle for justice, and this enduring search for meaning.
It's definitely not a black and white story.
No, there's so much nuance to how this faith has shaped our values, our institutions, and really our understanding of the world.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to explore.
Yeah.
It challenges us to think critically, to wrestle with those difficult questions, and to appreciate the richness and diversity of human experience.
You've mentioned before how Christianity seems to be at a crossroads.
Yeah.
What do you think its future holds? Will it fade away, or will it find new ways to be relevant in the 21st century?
That's a question that's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah,
And honestly, no one has a crystal ball.
right.
But
I just got
I
this
think
new ring in
Christianity's
the
future
mail,
really
and I
depends on its
love
ability
it.
to adapt to the
It's
changing
made from a
world around
premium
it.
metal
Okay.
called
It needs
tungsten,
to
and
address
with the
the
charcoal
challenges of
hammer
secularism,
design, you can style
social
it with
justice,
anything.
and the search for
It's a
meaning
comfort
in a
cut
way that
ring
resonates
plated
with
with
people
rose
today.
gold,
So it's
which
not
gives
just
off
about
a
holding on to
luxurious
tradition.
feel.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's
Plus,
about
the smooth
finding
gold
ways to
interior
make those
prevents any
traditions
damage
meaningful
or coloring
in a
to
modern
your
context.
fingers.
It's about rediscovering those
So
core
if you're
values
looking for a
of love,
stylish ring, tap the
compassion,
link
and
below and
justice,
get one
Right.
today.
and applying them to the issues that we're facing today. We've talked a lot about the big picture stuff, the historical sweep of Christianity's influence.
Right.
But for you personally, what's the most fascinating aspect of this whole topic? What keeps you coming back to it?
For me, it's the human stories.
Yeah.
It's the individuals who lived and breathed this faith,
Right.
who wrestled with its complexities, and who used it to change the world. It's the saints and the sinners, the reformers and the revolutionaries, the everyday people who found meaning and purpose in their belief.
Yeah.
Their stories remind us that Christianity is more than just a set of doctrines. It's a living tradition that has been shaped by countless human hearts and minds over the centuries.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It reminds us that history isn't just about these abstract forces.
It's not.
It's about people, their choices, and the impact they have on the world.
Exactly. And those choices, even the seemingly small ones,
Yeah.
they can ripple outwards and create these waves of change that we might never fully comprehend.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one question you'd like to leave our listener with? Something to ponder as they continue to explore this fascinating topic on their own.
Here's one. How has Christianity, both for good and for bad, shaped your own worldview, your values, and your understanding of the world? It's a question worth reflecting on, I think, no matter where you stand on matters of faith.
That's a great question. And it brings us back to that idea of personal relevance that we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's not just about history. It's about understanding ourselves and the world we live in. Well, folks, that's it for our deep dive into the rise and impact of Christianity.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the Roman Empire to wokeness, from Constantine to the investiture controversy. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating topic with you.
And a huge thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this intellectual adventure. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we highly recommend checking out Tom Holland's book, Dominion.
Yeah, it's a great read.
It's a brilliant and thought-provoking exploration of how Christianity shaped the Western world. We'll be sure to include a link in the show notes.
And if you're hungry for more deep dives into history, culture, and ideas, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. We've got a whole lineup of fascinating topics coming your way.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.